Our first guest is the host of the hugely popular radio program called The Howard Stern Show. Please welcome the one, the only Howard Stern, ladies and gentlemen.
It's become increasingly difficult to do my show. The same show I did a year ago, the government will fine me for it. I have millions of dollars of fines against me, and this is my way of checkmating the United States government and saying, you know what, I've got somewhere to go. We're going to build a new future. This is the beginning of the new age.
Okay, now, that's good.
Thanks.
But you raise so many questions here. First of all, are you suggesting that without dirty material and things that would not be allowed on your radio show, Chris Rock is not funny? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I am suggesting that. I've seen Chris Rock in situations where he cannot be himself. And I can't be myself anymore on the radio. I'm not looking to get on the radio and say the F word. I'm not looking to get on the radio and make everything so blatantly sexual. That's not what this is about. I'm talking about 10, 15 years ago, the topics I used to talk about on the radio, I'm now being fined millions of dollars for.
How is it any different if the radio signal is bounced off a satellite and then back down through the airwaves? And why won't you be subject to future restrictions at satellite radio? Well,
the difference is my listeners now, if they come with me, and I hope they do, and that's sort of why I'm here. You know, I want them to come. To answer your question, for 40 cents a day,
right,
when you pay for something, you're paying for it to come into your home, much like cable or anything else. And in the beginning of cable, everyone said, well, I'm not going to pay for TV. When you hear the difference, and when you hear the type of programming we can put on, you will see that 40 cents a day is not too much. And that's the reason the government cannot regulate it. If you're paying for it, it's not the public airwaves. We don't get any of this nonsense. How can we have a democracy? How can we have an open exchange of ideas? Yes, I mean, you know, we talk about sex, but come on. I mean, everywhere in Europe they talk about sex, and this is all taboo. People are getting fined. We're being told what we can listen to. It's time for a change. I'm going. Come with me, please. That's all I'm saying. Very simple.
Now,
so 80 and 100 million a year go into your corporation. You go on Sirius, the satellite radio channel, okay? How are they going to make a profit? I mean, how many people do you think are going to go over? And what are they, like $50 for that thing, subscription?
Is it my problem if they make a profit?
No.
Is that my worry?
No.
They paid me to go there and entertain the people, and that's what I'll do, and they shall come. What I've heard so far is that when I got there, they had 600,000 subscribers. And lo and behold, it's been a year later now, and it's been in the news that I'm going to satellite. They are now estimating 3.1 million people have joined.
And how much is it a year to do?
It's $12 a month for a radio subscription, and I think it is the best. If you want to get into this, I think it's the best buy in town.
So if they get a couple of million, then they can make money.
Sure.
Off
Of course they're going to make money. Satellite radio, it's inevitable. Because FM and AM radio have been so regulated, so overly commercialized, because the content has been so watered down, guys like me who make people laugh in the morning and appeal to millions of people can't do our act anymore. And guess what's happening?
Well, good.
Satellite radio will succeed.
We'll see.
And their brain doesn't tell them when they're done eating. So these kids will just eat and eat and eat, and they'll shovel it in and shovel it in, so don't do any food jokes.
Oh,
and I'm like, oh, fuck, without food jokes. You know, what am the only other thing I got is bashing the gays. I got nothing.
Right.
So I go up there, and there's an enormous buffet at the Prada Willie buffet.
Were the kids there with the disease?
No, they didn't show, but the parents...
If they saw the buffet, they go...
Yeah,
exactly.
they have to tie them down.
That's not even a joke. Like, they go nuts. They run towards the buffet, and, of course, I overeat at the Prada Willie buffet.
Right.
And, like, I stuff food down. I can't stop eating because I got drunk first, and I couldn't stop eating. Like the disease. So, before I go on stage, they show a video of these children. 15-minute video. It's the saddest. Before I go up, I got to follow this. The saddest video you ever saw.
Well, what's in the video?
In the video is all the children that have this disease and the parents struggling with dealing with them, and the parents look like they're going to explode with exhaustion. They can't. The kids don't sleep. They have too much energy, and they have to always monitor them because they won't stop. They'll eat themselves to death.
And they're all real fat, right?
They're all enormously obese. So there's the one they focus on is a 17-year-old girl who's 400 pounds, and the parents have to hire these enormous bodyguards and put padding up all over because when the ice cream truck comes by...
Oh, man. When the ice cream truck comes by, what happens?
When she hears the bell...
What?
What are you doing over there?
What do they do? What do they have to do?
When she hits the bells.
Oh, my God.
When she... I'm sorry, God. The parents are sleep deprived. When she hears the bells of the ice cream truck, she gets up and goes, ah! She's just jumping around.
They're very sensitive.
It's thunderous. The house is moving. Like fucking boom, boom. They hire these enormous bodyguards.
You think guys that live there to tackle her?
Yeah, well, they hire these guys who like used to play for the Bears. Like Mike Singletary lives with them, and they have to tackle her.
Oh, that's
and there's all pads and
they show a film of that, and then they go, here's
they
Artie
show.
Lang.
Well, this is what. Oh God, they show a film, and it's so sad. It's like, and all the parents are there, and you know, it's heartbreaking, and literally, like it ends with these kids maybe dying, and it fades.
Oh my God!
It fades to black.
I never heard of this syndrome.
It fades to black.
They did a whole special on it, like on
They did,
Discovery.
and
How many kids have it?
And I had seen the special. It fades to black.
You know.
And the guy goes, thank you, ladies and gentlemen, from the Howard Stern Show, Artie Lang.
You're very sensitive, Artie Lang.
So I go up, and every instinct I have as a comedian is to say, look, I have this disease. Clearly.
Or just to jump on the table and eat some rolls.
But this huge buffet had, you know how weddings had to have carving stations?
Yeah.
I was at the carving station like all night. I couldn't stop going. So my first joke was, I've been cut off at the carving station. And it like gets oozed. Nobody and goes, oh, is this guy gonna make fun of eating? Like boo, you know, people are booing. And then I just, I'm sorry. And then
I'm working for free.
It was a real awkward moment. Like, thank God, because they said thank you. And then I went into some jokes about the Red Sox as it was in Boston, and I made a joke about Bill Buckner. They booed it. Now I'm bombing.
Way to win over the crowd.
I don't know what to do. So at the end, there was an old guy not laughing in the front, and I got mad, so I got dirty, because I was being clean. I got dirty, and I said fuck in the joke. And when I said fuck in the joke, the old guy goes, ah! He loves fuck. So I just ended dirty. And exactly.
Hey, look at this.
And then I got off the stage. It was, I mean, they were happy I went. But.
We are all a part of the history. We are all a part of this day. We are all the last of the dying breed. Together, we are strong.
Hello, this is George Takei, and you, my cuddly muffins, are listening to the award-winning podcast, Nothing Worthwhile, with Moody and Groo. Oh my. Fuck Bill Shatner.
Thank you, George Takei. It is America's #1 bi-coastal podcast with over 300, count them, that's over 300 downloads.
Is it really?
Featuring two annoying Jews. It is Nothing Worthwhile, representing the West Coast in the great city of Phoenix, Arizona.
Cheapy.
It is me, Evan. It is me, Evan Moody, and on the East Coast, representing the great city of Coral Springs, Florida.
Pretty much. That's it.
Andrew Gruthius, I feel like we're on an ISD line today. Gru, I can't see you. I can hear you. How the hell are you, my friend?
Well, I can see you, and you're looking very handsome today.
Freshly showered.
Freshly showered. I haven't showered since I got home from work the other day, so I'm good.
All right, well, that's just a mere 48 hours. Hey, well, what is that?
Yeah, but I'm doing well. Having a nice weekend. How about yourself?
Quiet. We'll go out later tonight and But fuck all that. Let's get
wait. Yeah,
we're here to talk about Howard Stern.
Howard Stern.
Part 1. Before we get to that topic at hand, let's scale back to our last discussion, Billy Joel, 12 Gardens. Groo, any feedback or thoughts on our last podcast going over the last 20 years or so of one Mr. William Martin Joel?
Actually, yes, there is some feedback. My brother, Steven, got really pissed off because pretty much every concert that I spoke about with you on that podcast, I neglected to mention that he was there with me. He was with me at the Bruce show where Billy got pulled on stage. He was with me at the at my first Billy Joel show, the Yankee Stadium. He was with me at the Millennium show. But finally, I gave him some credit when I talked about how it was all of Steven's, my brother Steven's cassette tapes that really cemented my Billy Joel fandom. So my apologies to him. But yeah, he was when you were out of town, Steven was my Billy Joel compadre, and still is. So thank you to him and my sincerest apologies. But that's pretty much the only. The other feedback I got, I did get some messages from the people in the Rocky podcast. I guess, love among podcast brothers. They love what we do. And that's about it. What about you?
Well, I wanted to tell you that Billy was actually back in the news last week, and not for anything worthwhile. We'll credit TMZ.com. Headline, "You may be right. He's pissed." Some crook thought he'd be a big shot breaking into Billy Joel's home, which would have been bad enough, but they trashed the Piano Man's beloved motorbikes too. Nassau County PD tells TMZ a burglary took place between last Saturday and Monday morning at Billy Joel's Long Island home. Cops say 12 motorcycles and a home office on the property had been vandalized. The article goes on to say that Billy Joel absolutely loves his motorcycles. He's a notorious gearhead and owns a local bike shop in his native Long Island. Groo, you may remember that the Piano Man and his motorcycles were in the news way back when, November 11th, 2016. It was the boss, Bruce Springsteen, while riding a motorcycle purchased from Billy Joel's motorcycle shop. You may remember that the bike notoriously broke down, and a fan picked up a stranded boss somewhere in Oyster Bay, Long Island. The fan took a selfie with Bruce and then drove Bruce to Farmingdale, New York, where he got a ride. Hot stuff. So, Billy Joel, house broken into, motorcycles vandalized.
That would piss Billy Joel off. Not about losing the bikes, but Bruce stealing his thunder once again. It's like Bruce always has to sneak into that headline, Hey, yeah, shit happens. What are you gonna do? I mean, he's a celebrity. He's a target. He's got his own bike shop. I mean, look. I doubt it's keeping him awake at night, but yeah, that's you never want to hear that. That's too bad, but you move on. Just like
I know Billy did a show, I think last night in Tampa. Speaking of Bruce and Billy, are you now going to read your official apology statement to me? As last week you rudely interrupted me and called me out incorrectly as I stated that Billy Joel and Bruce Springsteen were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame class together in 1999?
I am still waiting for my rabbi to write the statement that I am not permitted to discuss the particulars of the incident. We'll call it the incident. But yes, I am waiting for the statement. It might take 2 or 3 more podcasts for it to be perfected, but you will receive penance for that error.
My favorite part was when I pulled it up on my phone, BillyJoel.com, and you still insisted that they were wrong as well.
I was so certain. I was so certain. I was confusing Billy Joel with John Mellencamp, who I think was a couple of years later inducted by Billy Joel. So it was because I remember that Billy was sort of unhappy with being overshadowed, as I would be. Bruce was clearly the centerpiece of the ceremony. He went last, so as he usually does, and it just definitely seemed like the Rock Hall was making it the Bruce Springsteen induction featuring Billy Joel and company. Even Paul McCartney played second fiddle to Springsteen that night. Anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a problem with the guys, in a sense, second fiddle. You have to remember, we discussed this last week, Bruce was entering phase one of a massive reunion tour with the E Street Band. So Bruce was getting a ton of mainstream press. What I didn't like was, Billy, second fiddle. To me, you got a little sniff. I mean, it was Ray Charles, a quick induction. I think Billy did one song. I believe he then did one song with Bonnie Raitt, and that was it. And that was it, where I feel like Billy, at least, the live, the jam, whatnot, could have got a little more shine. But it was clearly a Bruce heavy night for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Do you think that it had to do anything with lack of output? Because even McCartney, like as Bruce was, even without the E Street Band throughout the 90s, Bruce's output was pretty, there was plenty of new music. As with McCartney had a couple albums, and Billy notoriously was a concert act with no original material. So he kind of faded from the record business, and the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is part of the record business, right? Do you agree with that?
I'm not going to say no. I'm not going to say you don't have a point, but remember, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, they've inducted a lot of acts that have been quiet for a lot longer time than Billy. Remember, Billy's last album was 93, 92, 99. You're talking about 6-7 years, which is a while, but it's not a universe of time as compared to some artists who may have a really long gap between albums. But they've inducted The Who and a lot of major acts that have not done anything for literally decades. So I'm not going to say there's nothing to it. I just don't think, in my opinion, it was a major play. Bruce was coming back with E Street, and that was just a massive headline. And Bruce wasn't even releasing anything new. It was just a reunion tour, but it was pretty massive. And
he had released a box set like around that time.
All right, come on.
Well, thank you. I'm just saying. But you also have to remember, at the time, there was controversy with Springsteen and his induction, him choosing not to include the E Street Band for that induction. Were you aware of that?
Yes, and let's save that for the Bruce.
Okay.
Let's save that for another time. He loves to crowbar these off topics.
Well, to bookend this thing,
it's gonna be one of these shows.
Yeah, but to bookend this thing, I'm just curious what you think. Why the seemingly constant disrespect for Billy Joel? Why do you think he's not considered at least mainstream, maybe outside of the East Coast? I don't know. He seems to be second tier.
Well, we talked about this. I think starting with the 12-12-12 performance, similar to even a guy like Phil Collins, the mainstream press has been a lot more balanced. We know that Billy was never a critical darling. And I just don't think at the end of the day, like we said last time, Billy Joel has the cultural gravitas, so to speak, of a lot of his fellow classic rock artists from that same time. He's just not seen in that same light. He didn't change the world with his singles. They're jukebox. They're great pop songs. They're great sing-along songs at a bar. But, he stayed away from a lot of heavy issues and not that he didn't touch upon politics, but I just don't think Billy's seen with that same cultural light, as we said before, as a Springsteen, even as an Elton John. That's just my thoughts on it.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because when I was listening, and this is the last thing I'll say about this, but when I was listening to the Sirius Town Hall thing, that the one from Miami a few weeks ago, they asked him about the current state of politics, and he's like, I'm a piano player. What do I have to say about that? And I thought about that, and I'm saying to myself, I'm listening to some of his old music, and these people, these writers, they write because they do have something to say. So people do Billy, I don't think Billy has a lot of faith in himself or his audience. You said that last week about faith in himself, and he doesn't consider himself to be a voice for people, and I think he is. And,
Okay.
I don't think he gives himself enough credit.
Okay, but I could also say on the flip side, and I don't want to get into a long, protracted argument, but I think maybe it's refreshing that a guy didn't want to really dip his foot into this stupid political pool, because he's not going to win no matter what. And, I don't have a problem with celebrities speaking up on issues. I've sort of changed my opinion about that. But if Billy so chooses to, focus on the music and not really focus on politics, so be it.
Yeah, you're right.
Everybody,
to each his own.
Every other a-hole has something to say. Who cares? But speaking of Billy Joel Town Hall, we know Billy Joel did a town hall with one king of all media, Howard Stern. And today, we're taking a look at his Sirius years. On October 6, 2004, Howard Stern announced he had signed a 5-year deal with Sirius Satellite Radio, a satellite subscription radio service. It was reported to be a 5-year deal in excess of $500 million. It was also reported that Howard would have a budget of around $100 million a year towards his show. That would go to staff, production, and programming costs. Reportedly, Howard and his entire radio team of Robin Quivers, Fred Norris, Artie Lang, and Gary Delabate will be joining Howard on this new adventure. A super exciting announcement for the King. It had been rumored for a while that Howard was on the move. Groo, thoughts and reactions on when you first heard Howard's announcement. He's moving the team to satellite radio, a relatively unknown quantity back in 2004. Were you excited? What were your thoughts on Howard's announcement?
I thought it was innovative, and I was very excited about it, because even though I didn't have a problem with the show on K-Rock, he used to describe it as like Swiss cheese, so many holes in the show, but that's kind of what made it funny to me. Like, the restraint made it funny, and I was a little skeptical about hearing him sort of unleashed on Sirius, but it was the future, and I was excited about it. I think at the time I already subscribed to what was then just Sirius.
Of course you did.
You know me. I waste money. I waste money on everything. But
to the 300 download people, if Andy had $100, 99 would go to entertainment costs.
You're 100% right. You're 100% right. I can't deny that. For whatever reason, I have like 4 Apple TVs, 2 iPads, and I use nothing. But
if I may jump in, I agree with you. I did not like the edits, though, to the show. I remember listening to it. I had already moved to Florida, and whatever the classic rock station from Broward County. It was a lot. I liked the restraint of Howard and the team with the language and the angles that they played on the air. But I listened to shows, Hand on the Bible in the car, that literally 30, 45 seconds to a minute was just dead air and edits and hitting the button, and it did. I don't know. It wasn't quite as fun anymore listening to that. When the show got that much cut up. Yeah,
but didn't his anger, at it, give the show some verve? It did for me. I used to love to hear. That was the most entertaining stuff. Hearing him bitch and moan about those things and his fights with Chiasano and all I remember that stuff very fondly. Maybe it's just because you don't get that kind of radio anymore, but that's for a different show. But I was excited. That's
okay.
A long answer to a short question. I was thrilled about it. Why not be the first guy? It should be the best guy. So that was great.
Speaking of anger, how did we get here? What are some of the factors that may have pushed Howard towards this decision? Well, obviously there was the controversy surrounding the Super Bowl halftime show, aired live February 1st, 2004. This led to an increased government crackdown.
Wait, that was the Janet Jackson thing?
Yes, the Justin Timberlake Janet Jackson.
Okay.
Oh, brother. All the momentum just killed.
What? I was trying to figure out what you were talking about.
All right, well, it's my
Didn't he do it?
dyslexia.
Didn't he do a halftime show of his own at somewhere?
I don't know. You're probably thinking of the WWE.
No, I'm not.
Stay focused.
All right, okay.
Stay focused.
Okay. Wait, center. I got to get my center. Okay.
Well, anyway, there was a lot of increased fines following a surge in audience complaints. Situation prompted tighter control over content by station managers, which made Stern feel dead creatively. The final blow may have been after Clear Channel Communications and Viacom were again fined for Stern-related content. The promise of hearing Howard on a subscription satellite radio exempt from the FCC's broadcast regulations was a startling one. Howard called it the start of a new era of radio. Groo touched upon it earlier, but the thought of Howard Stern unhinged. No more walls, no more FCC. Hearing him be able to speak completely free had to be a real intoxicating thought for Stern fans like ourselves. Groo, you felt a little different, though. You liked Howard. Did you like Howard a little bit boxed in?
Hindsight is 20/20. I wasn't thinking this way back then, but yeah, looking back, I remember because they still play a lot of that old K-Rock stuff on the channels, so I do enjoy hearing him boxed in like that, and the frustration that was part of the enjoyment of the show because we kind of felt the same way. So it's like he spoke. He was our voice of anger and frustration, and so the answer to your question is yes. But I also have a question because you're saying that your research is telling you that it was that. Wait, no, I'm asking because I don't know.
Go ahead.
You're saying that it was the lure of not being stifled that pulled him to Sirius. Do you think Mel Karmazin had something to do with convincing him? Because you got to remember now, and you might have this in your research, but you got to remember the audience was going to automatically diminish almost immediately because he's going from tens of millions of listeners on terrestrial to about at that point close to 1 million subscribers. So he had to think hard about it, don't you think?
Yeah, and we'll talk about subscriptions in a little bit. But your question about Mel Karmazin. Well, Howard had referenced that maybe 3 or 4 years earlier, I want to say around 2002, he was approached, I believe, by Sirius or XM, or maybe both. And at the time, he took a pass because he felt like the infrastructure, the technology was not where it wanted to be. I think Howard's always thinking one step ahead, thinking to, the next job or the next challenge. My question here was, we talked about your thoughts on the announcement, but what was the early expectations of a show in which Howard Stern was FCC free? And I'll answer it first and throw it to you. Mm-hmm. And again, maybe you thought different, but I was absolutely in full bloom Stern fandom, and it was really intoxicating. I mean, I could not wait to hear Howard on a platform with no restrictions. My expectations were absolute gangbusters. To go back real quick, I mean, Howard did openly say, he knew that his fandom would be minimized, and he would be working from a much smaller platform as compared to terrestrial radio. But I believe he felt confident that he was able to boost the numbers, and we'll talk about it because ultimately, it's a matter of opinion. But the numbers certainly were boosted. But let's go to what were your early expectations of before we even heard the first show? You were maybe a little bit skeptical of the announcement, or a little bit wondering. And I don't know if this is asking the same question again, but
I actually have a different answer.
Go ahead.
Because in thinking about it over the last few minutes, I remember it wasn't the actual show that I was most excited about. I knew that it would be pretty much the same, just with some, maybe more raw language and more adult content. But I didn't think the show was going to change too much. What excited me the most was the 24-hour access. I was looking forward to all the extra programming, the history, the tissue time with Heidi Cortez type stuff. Like all the things that the wrap up show, all these things. Remember on terrestrial radio, you had to listen from 6 to 10:30, 11. Otherwise, you weren't hearing the show that day. Now they were announcing how it was going to work. Once the show ended, it was going to go on a continuous loop, and that excited me. It excited me that I'd be able to hear it 24 hours a day, plus other content. And I was excited about what that content was going to be, and so that's what really excited me about this thing. Yeah.
All right. Well,
what do you? Do you agree with that? Did you ever?
I was out of my mind. Everything that you just mentioned. I literally envisioned myself not listening, not watching cable TV. I would have Howard on in a background on the radio 24. That's how nutty of a fan I was back then. It was Howard and wrestling probably wasn't even as close at that point. I was just in full bloom Howard fandom. I was going to Best Buy to get that car radio. I didn't care what it cost. I was getting the I was getting the service, and I had a little bit of knowledge of Sirius and XM, but really knew nothing about it until Howard made the announcement.
Did you get it for the car and the house?
I got it
like I did.
I don't. Come to think of it, I don't even know if I got it for the house, but I definitely got it for the car. The car went in and right away. I think. I don't even remember, to be honest with you. It was such a long time ago.
Yeah. It was what, 2005?
Yeah, well, Howard and the gang's final live show on terrestrial airways aired December 16, 2005. We'll credit thetodayShow.com. The self-proclaimed king of all media signed off terrestrial radio for the last time with a typically over-the-top Midtown Manhattan party for 1,000 of rabid fans. The morning was capped off by a victory lap through Times Square, where Stern stood atop a double-decker bus. It was also broadcast over the internet via Yahoo.com. People will discover next month that free speech for Howard Stern isn't free. The cost to hear Howard on Sirius satellite radio is $12.95 a month. For those in Stern's current audience of over 12 million, the question will be who decides who will move, who will not move, and follow the First Amendment poster boy. Howard and the gang did a remake of the classic "What a Wonderful World," followed by John Lennon's "Imagine." The latter's line saying, "I hope someday you'll join us," taking on a new meaning with Howard's move to satellite. "Good morning and welcome to the last show on terrestrial radio," Stern said, as the sound of taps played in the background. And then I wanted to just say, okay. He wrapped it up by saying, "Long live the Howard Stern Show audience," he said before leaving the stage, "the last of a dying breed." So, Groo, was Howard leaving for satellite the end of the shock jock era, at least on terrestrial radio? And is Howard Stern at this point really the last of a dying breed on radio?
No. There were still those out there. Nobody achieved the innovation of Howard, but they're still out there. One quote unquote shock jock just got the goddamn Medal of Freedom. They're still out there. They're still on terrestrial radio.
And
they still have. Go ahead.
Hold on. I wouldn't call Rush Limbaugh a shock jock. I would call him a conservative right-wing political commentator, and I'm sure he's said some outrageous things over the years.
Yeah, to me, it's just talk radio.
I don't put Howard in that same category. I just don't.
Mm-hmm.
Imitators, to me, Howard really was the last of a dying breed. I don't know what's currently on regular radio. I don't really listen to it, and I don't know. I kind of felt like Howard, and maybe to a certain extent Imus, they were kind of the last ones.
Yeah, well, at the time, I guess maybe you're right. Maybe I reversed that because I wasn't. Look, we were listening to Stern constantly. I didn't even know of the existence of others at the time. Like, I knew there was like the Mark and Bryans of the world, the DeBellas of the world, all these cheap imitations, but they were more local. Stern was nationwide, and there were a select few like Limbaugh, who was also nationwide. But as far as what Howard did and still does, he was the only of that breed. There's nobody who's ever done anything even remote. Like, I know Howard loves to say that there are a lot of cheap imitations, and even though I just said that, but they're really not. Nobody can do that.
You're all over the place.
I am. Because in thinking about it, I come into this. No, look, I come into this thing cold, so I try to empty my mind. So because I want to react. I want to be.
You need to empty your mind like you empty your bowels. Go ahead.
You don't want any of that, believe me. But yeah, I mean, he was the only of that breed. So yes, he was the last of the breed that he created, and he carried the torch from one platform to another. One platform that he reinvented, and another platform that he basically invented.
There's a lot of there's sort of a lot of criticism because Howard has always, his take was always he was the first and the shockiest to do it. And some people say, Steve Dahl from Chicago did some of this prior to Howard, but I don't care. I'm going to not on everything, but on this narrative, I believe Howard, and if he didn't do it first, he certainly did it the best. And when he left, and we'll talk about the void when he left terrestrial radio, but it did sort of feel like he was sort of the last of his kind.
Well, like I said, he was to me he was the only of his kind. So I had nothing to compare to because I never listened even for a moment to anybody else except for, I would say, Imus, only because my dad would listen to Imus. He was not a Stern guy, so when he'd drive me to school in the morning, he'd have Imus on. But Imus kind of copied Stern, or at least tried to, once they became rivals at NBC, I think, because Imus's show was very different before Stern came on the scene. So, but we see that. I mean, Howard invented it. Howard was the first. It's all right there in private parts. So obviously it's factual. WNBC.
Let's talk about Howard's new show. Media reports state that Howard will be given 2 channels, Howard 100 and Howard 101. And will be forming the Howard 100 news team, a group of news reporters hired solely to report on daily stories surrounding the radio show and those associated with it. Howard 100 News was sort of Howard's take on AM news radio a la WABC or WINS, complete with the old school news team jackets.
The teletype. Yeah, I remember that.
Pretty brilliant move at the time. All right, so we're getting some early details. Howard 100, Howard 101, Howard 100 News. Howard soon ended his 11-year association with the E! Channel and secured a deal with the In Demand Network to launch Howard Stern On Demand, a digital cable video on-demand service to broadcast uncensored tapings of the Stern radio show. The service was relaunched as Howard TV in March 2006. We're getting some early news on Howard. Getting a little more excited at this point.
Yes, but also absolutely. I mean, the Howard first we're getting 1 channel, and then when they announced we're getting 2 channels, I was like, this was going to be completely. This was going to go completely off the rails, and it was going to be the greatest thing ever.
Yeah, I was foaming at the mouth.
Yeah, without a doubt. But it was a thrilling time to be a Howard Stern fan, without exception. So,
Howard's given a new state of the.
Why did it wait? I have a question though, because you brought it up. Why do you know? Because I've never actually heard the answer to the question. Why did it have to be called Howard 101? Howard 101 is so much cooler. Do you know? I know there was a reason.
Well, I don't know. It was just my pronunciation, but
No. It wasn't. It's not you. It's that I remember John Hine like talking about it, but never really said why. He just said this is what we have to call it. Did you ever hear anything about that?
No, but I know Howard specifically asked for. I think he asked for the 100 channel. I remember him talking about that on terrestrial radio. He wanted the 100 number.
Right.
That was something I know he definitely requested from Sirius. The 101 or the 101, whatever you want to call it. Don't know too much more about that.
Yeah, it was interesting to me.
Well, we have got great momentum for this new incarnation of the Stern Show. But, Groo, who was going to replace Howard on terrestrial radio? The far biggest name replacing Howard in 7 major markets was none other than David Lee Roth, the former lead singer of Van Halen. David Lee was a great guest on the Stern Show, unhinged, goofy, weird. Groo, what'd you think about when you first heard David Lee Roth is replacing Howard Stern on K-Rock in New York and in most of those major markets?
You're going to hate me. But I'm pretty much the opposite of what everybody else thought. At first, I thought it was going to be a shit show. Everybody else thought it was going to be interesting. From what I remember, I thought it was going to be a train wreck, and I actually enjoyed it. Everybody else seemed to be the opposite. They thought it was going to be cool, and it ended up being a train wreck. Not to me. I enjoy David Lee Roth. I think he's so daffy and just a wackadoo, and it's just entertaining to me. And his show, I remember, he was like him and his like uncle, whatever his name was, and whenever he would talk, he'd have music playing in the background, and it just didn't click. But for me, it was not must listen radio. Let's put it that way.
All right,
but I did enjoy it.
Let's get to the David Lee Roth show. It launched January 3rd, 2006. The show was produced by CBS Radio as part of its new free FM format. David Lee was on in New York City, Boston, Cleveland, Dallas, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, and West Palm Beach. But already, the show starts...
Wait, say that again.
West Palm Beach.
No. All right, forget it. It's just funny how you list like these huge markets, and then it's like New York, Los Angeles, Philadelphia, and Pompano Beach. Like it's.
Well, West Palm's not Poughkeepsie. I mean, West Palm's
it's
a
true.
decent market. Okay,
it's true. But for David Lee Roth, I don't know.
I mean, the show starts, and within 2 months, there's already mass speculation that the show is going to be canceled or go through major format changes. David Lee Roth takes an unexpected 1-week vacation after the 8th week of the show, following weeks of mounting tension between Roth and CBS Radio management, which Roth often expressed on the air. CBS abruptly pulled the show without fanfare on April 21st, 2006. It was then announced 5 days later that it would be replaced full-time by the Opie and Anthony show. We got 3 months of David Lee Roth and it's gone. Well, we know that Groo listened and maybe even liked somewhat the David Lee Roth show. I heard a little bit of it, didn't think much about it. David Lee is gone after 3 months. You surprised?
Not at all, because even though I liked the show for what it was, there was nobody who would have succeeded coming right hot on the heels of Howard Stern, because Howard leaving was such a huge deal, and I give David Lee Roth credit for having the balls to be that guy, or maybe he just didn't even realize what an undertaking it was going to be and how much the deck was stacked against him. But who would have succeeded taking Howard's place? Because that's what it was.
That's a good point. Good point. You can hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you fine.
Okay. Let's go to Howard. Howard's first show on Sirius was the aforementioned January 9th, 2006, complete with a new Fist in the Air logo. Howard and the gang opened to Led Zeppelin's Black Dog, edited with Pat O'Brien's scandalous voice messages left on left on a lady friend's answering machine as he was reportedly high on cocaine, cheating on his wife and prepping for an orgy. Off and running, Howard adds openly gay George Takei, the deep voice, Star Trek fame, and a well-known Howard Stern guest. George Takei, brutally honest. He's got that great, unique voice. What'd you think of this addition to the show, as George Takei is the sometimes special guest announcer?
Oh, my. That's what I thought of it.
Okay.
No, that was number one. Is there a better way, a more apropos way to open up his show, his first show, with that ridiculously controversial Pat O'Brien thing? When I first heard that, and I heard it live, when I first heard that, I'm like, okay, we're in overdrive now. This is going to be something. And I didn't know that Takei was going to be part of it. Did you? Was that a surprise?
That was a surprise. A surprise on a couple of levels. George Takei's, openly gay and not shy about it.
Had he come out of the closet at that point, though? I don't think so. Did he?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
He was like almost don't ask me, but he's kind of like a gay icon, even back then. I mean, he was really a voice for the gay community. Again, getting some early signs of Howard trying to be maybe a little bit more inclusive, or just adding a new wrinkle to the show. No matter what, I thought Takei, he's got a great sense of humor, and so on any level, despite his orientation or whatnot, I thought he was a good fit with the show. You agree? Disagree?
Oh, I completely agree. He was. I loved it when he was on. And Howard has always been, at least in my listening time, he's always been a champion for homosexuality. Don't you think? You disagree?
A champion? I don't know.
All right, maybe not champion, but he has never been.
He's been inclusive, and even back in the 80s, he had even gay, dial-a-date, lesbian, and gay guy. I mean,
yeah, it was never disparaging.
No. Champion, I don't know yet, but he certainly would give a platform. He was certainly not discriminatory, but he'd make fun of everybody just the same.
Yeah, he was an equal opportunity offender, but Takei was, to me, listening to him was, as part of the show. The gay thing had nothing to do with it. He fit into that show like a glove, and still does whenever he's on. So that's
yes,
I think. Oh, geez, here we go.
With lubricate. Okay.
Yeah, oh, geez. Oh my.
Howard talks about the early vibe at Sirius, almost like Woodstock, with all of these little different radio channels working under one roof. But of course, Andrew, there is the money. On January 9, 2006, the first day of his broadcast on Sirius, Howard Stern and super agent Don Buchwald receive a total of 34.3 million shares of Sirius stock, worth over $218 million, for exceeding agreed-upon subscription number targets set when Howard signed his contract. Howard received yet again a second subscription bonus in January of 2007 when he received another 22 million shares of stock, worth over close to $83 million. At this time, 2006 Time magazine included Stern in its Time 100 list. Forbes ranked Howard number 7 on the Celebrity 100 list in June 2006. The money's out there. It's pretty massive. Not too much to say, but any thoughts on the massive amount of money Howard pulled when he moved to Sirius Satellite?
Yes, pissed me off because we were selling blood and sperm just to be able to afford to listen to him do the same exact thing that we're doing right now.
Well, let me ask you about that. And listen, all joking aside, and I know we've talked about it, it was, I think at this point, $12, $13 a month for Howard. I don't know. This might be a dumb question. Any thoughts about just the amount of money you or somebody had to pay for the right to get the subscription service and to listen to Howard Stern?
No, it was a non-issue because to me, I mean, even before Howard had signed, even before it was even announced, I looked at satellite radio as to terrestrial radio what cable TV was to, up to Channel 13. So to me, it was the future, and it was going to that's what people were going to listen to. I thought terrestrial radio was going to eventually die. I was very wrong, and a lot of people were very wrong. The analogy ended up not really happening, but at the time, Howard was worth it. He was the number one guy on radio in if not the world, at least the United States, and you can't really put a price on that. So hearing the amount of money that he was getting did not faze me at all, and $12 a month didn't bother me either.
Terrestrial radio, it didn't die, but I mean, it's not a thriving market by any stretch of the imagination.
No, but I don't think satellite is what they thought it was going to be, at least not yet. Like I expected everybody to like automatically have it. Like you can't get TV now without getting cable. I thought it was going to be like that, and it's not.
Okay, good point. We know that Sirius merged with rival service XM in 2008 to form Sirius XM. Due to that merger, the company yet again paid Howard another $25 million per a clause in his contract. But not all news is a good one on the Stern front. February 28, 2006, CBS Radio filed a lawsuit against Stern, Buchwald, and Sirius, claiming that Stern misused CBS broadcast time to promote Sirius for unjust enrichment during his last 14 months on terrestrial radio. A settlement was reached out of court in May 2006 in which Sirius paid CBS $2 million for the rights of Howard Stern's radio show since 1985. Howard initially was prohibited from playing them on Sirius. So one thing Howard really does well is he holds a press conference. He's able to portray himself as a victim, and this is not the first time he has done so. If you do remember, Howard and the gang were forbidden by contract to mention Sirius while on terrestrial radio. So they used the code phrase, So in a sense, Howard does use his radio show to promote his next radio show. Any thoughts on the CBS lawsuit?
Yeah, they had every right to sue him, and the outcome was exactly what it should have been. If they want to use CBS-produced material, they should have to pay for it, even if it's Howard using it. And $2 million, as far as I'm concerned, is a small price to pay for the years of 5-day-a-week, 4 to 5 hour broadcast. So I think it was forecasted. I think if I recall, they knew they were going to get hit with something. Do you recall that?
Well, I remember that Howard could not initially play the stuff, and they did some cheesy remakes, which were not good. But actually, now that we're talking about it, $2 million for the rights to that massive catalog is pennies on the dollar.
Yes.
I mean, it's just phenomenal. I mean,
it's nothing.
Howard or Buchwald or whoever, Sirius played it. I mean, they played it perfectly. No, $2 million, and you've got years of just brilliant radio and brilliant content.
And think of what they've done, or at least not so much recently, but think of what they have done with all that stuff, with like the history of Howard Stern and all these programs that they have tried. Some failed, some did not. Master tape theater, all of those things. They have gotten so much mileage out of what, in a sense, is tip money to guys like that. So, yeah, it had to happen, and God bless them all.
By all accounts, the Stern Show is firing on all cylinders. Howard is on 100. Howard reruns. Bubba the Love Sponge is on in the afternoons, and Scott Farrell is doing sports late nights. There are various other Howard 101 shows featuring many of the names from the expanded Stern Show universe. However, trouble lays ahead for one talented but troubled comedian, Artie Lang. Let's go back, Groo, to March of 2005. Lang secures a deal to star and executive produce his own comedy feature film, Artie Lang's Beer League. Reportedly, the stress of putting the film together, doing gigs, doing the Stern Show, caused Lang to drink heavily and take up to 20 painkillers a day. He misses all of the cast auditions and pre-production meetings, and then June 2005, he misses 4 days from the actual filming of the movie. This is caused by withdrawals. He sits at home. Frank Sebastiano, one of his good friends and part of the production staff, threatened to cancel the film if he does not show up to work. At that point, Artie obtains, and he's talked about it many times on the Stern Show, Subutex, which was a pharmaceutical that got him well enough to return to work. Beer League is wrapped up. It premieres September 13, 2006 at the Ziegfeld Theater. Artie does admit on Stern the real reasons in which he missed filming on Beer League. I absolutely love Beer League. It's a complete profanity-filled suburban lowest common denominator laugh riot. The scene in which the softball team ends up in jail with Dirt, the old man, is one. I love watching that clip on YouTube over and over again. Small pivot. Artie Lang, Beer League. Any thoughts on the movie, Groo?
Yeah, I agree with you. I remember. I mean, it's not a good movie.
No, it's not.
But it's funny as hell.
Yes.
And Artie is not a good actor, but he's funny as hell. He was surrounded by a great supporting team. He had Ralph Macchio, the Karate Kid himself. He had Nick DiPaolo had a role in it. Seymour Cassell. He had some good character actors in there. And I remember I saw it in the city with our friend Craig, who we keep mentioning, but has never been on the show. We got to get him in one of these times. But I saw it with him in the theater, and the one
Hold on. It's Nothing Worthwhile with Moody and Groo.
Okay, well, the thing is, this has something, but this has something to do with you.
That's because you just love to name drop. Go ahead.
No, this has something to do with you, because I remember I was seeing it with Craig, but there was one moment. Well, there were many moments, but one in particular where I wished that you were with us, because when you and me go see a movie that makes us laugh, we end up bruised because we beat the crap out of each other. And the part where the little guy swings and can't even get the bat around and throws up, that made me start screaming. And I wish that you were there, because you and I would have had a field day with that one. That and Nick DiPaolo's moment at the bachelor party made me laugh hysterically. There's nothing that replaces a really funny movie, and Beer League did exactly what it was supposed to do. And I remember thinking about Artie at the time, and the poor bastard couldn't even enjoy the accolades for it because he was just so miserable and so hyped up on drugs. But the movie, even though I don't know if it was a financial success, but it was funny, and that's all that really matters to guys like us, I think. Yeah,
it had a $2.5 million budget. It
must have made that back.
Yeah, it was in a limited release. I know that. It didn't make much. You mentioned Artie and drugs. So, I got so many notes. He misses the Comedy Central roast of Bob Saget. He writes his book, Too Fat to Fish. That ends up #1 on the New York Times bestseller list. Again, showing the clout of the Stern Show. At this point in 2009, Artie Lang is earning a reported over $700,000 a year for working with Stern, and roughly over $3 million a year for stand-up gigs. Now, you have to remember, Artie's not a writer on the Stern Show. He's a part of the team. He's not a writer.
He's a performer.
Performer. He's making fantastic money. One article I read was he had ended up in West Palm Beach, Florida, to complete a 21-day rehab program. He left after 7 days, booked a hotel room on a 4-night bender, spent over $5,000 on a woman, haircut, 2 pairs of sunglasses.
Are you talking about me or Artie Lang?
Artie Lang. Here's how we know it's Artie Lang. He returned back to New York, booked 3 nights at Caroline's, and earned a reported $35,000. So he's spending money like water, and he's making money like water. So, at this point, Artie is he's really high profile on the Stern Show.
He's an addict. That trumps everything.
Yeah, you may even remember he had a very controversial appearance on the first episode of Joe Buck Live.
I do remember that, yeah.
An HBO sports show with Joe Buck. Artie absolutely goes on a legendary profane spree on the show, and Joe Buck is canceled after 3 episodes.
They blamed Artie.
Yeah, it's just he's got, DVDs, Stern Show. He's missing days at work on the Stern Show. Rumors about drugs, alcohol. Howard maybe with a blind eye, but Howard on the air is claiming he doesn't know, and he can't really read the tea leaves. But we do know that November 2009, Artie cancels all of his stand-up gigs for the rest of the year and throughout 2010. He begins writing on another book, tentatively titled "College is for Losers." Situation culminates December 9, 2009. Artie shows up to the Howard Stern Show after spending the previous 7 hours drinking whiskey, taking painkillers. He's groggy on the air. During one commercial break, Sirius management reportedly tells Lang to go home. He was granted time off the show. He voluntarily checked into a rehab facility in Long Island, but reportedly hated everything about it and left 8 days later. He then returns home and spends the next several days in his apartment on alcohol and a pill binge. And, of course, the horrible news, January 2nd, 2010, Lang attempts suicide for a reported second time at his house, drinking bleach, slitting his wrists, stabbing himself in the abdomen 9 times with a 13-inch kitchen knife. Really terrible stuff. He's found on the floor by his mother. Unbeknownst to him, reportedly Howard, some of the members of the team, Colin Quinn and family were planning an intervention. Lang was taken to the hospital for surgery, transferred to a psychiatric ward a week later. 1 week after that, SiriusXM reportedly states that Lang will be welcomed back to the Stern Show following his recovery. Howard soon later decides against it, thinking he would not aid his recovery. As soon as I heard the stunning news, I know I either called you or texted you. Absolutely stunning. Howard Stern's right-hand man attempts to commit suicide. Terrible news. What were your thoughts when you heard Artie, and just an absolutely crazy story?
I remember exactly where I was when I heard it. I was walking out of jury duty in Hop Hog, Long Island, and it was horrible news, but not surprising. I mean, we knew that Artie was just a tortured guy. If you read Too Fat to Fish, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and so we know, losing his father at the age that he did, that really destroyed him inside. And we could see the slow burn with all of that stuff. We were like, I remember, I think you and I were talking about, like, when is the other shoe going to drop? Like, something is bound to happen. Either we thought he was going to, like, maybe get fired from the show.
As a fan, I was almost advocating it. I hated, they would sort of play it off as comedy. Artie would fall asleep on the air. He would nod off. And it, to me, you're making, insane money. I don't know. Maybe it's my work ethic or my stupidity, but you got to show up ready to rock and roll. And clearly, to me, I didn't know to the extent. I mean, obviously, I was younger back then, but I knew something was definitely awry, so to speak.
Yeah, but he was also burning the candle at both ends. The same thing happened with Jackie a little bit. Not to that extreme level, but remember, what's that famous clip of Stuttering John calling Jackie, waking him up, like right in the middle of the show. You remember that clip? Because Jackie had like a stand-up gig the night before, and like that's what stand-up comedy happens at night. You don't do. He doesn't go from the show ending at 11 o'clock, and he's got a noon gig at Caroline's. So Artie was burning the candle at both ends, and what do these people use to keep themselves going? Cocaine, and he was using it among other things, and plus with the trauma from his childhood. It just all sort of curled up into a ball and knocked him off the train tracks.
You don't think, though, that this is much, not as much, but you don't think there's a factor of being addicted to the money? Because Artie, made a great living. He could have maybe, done stand-up gigs, spaced them out. He didn't have to have such a crush of a schedule. But I believe Artie has said as much. The money was just phenomenal money, and you don't want to part with it.
However, all right, I'll agree with that to a point, but the one difference, because Artie was, if he wasn't a star, but he was a successful performer before the Stern Show. Wait, but I have a point here, because there's one difference. He wasn't making the kind of money that he did once he started on the Stern Show. However, he also wasn't having to get up at 5:30 every morning when he was just doing stand-up and just appearing on Mad TV and things like that. So add in the 5-day-a-week early rising thing. I think that was a factor. You don't think so?
Yeah, but I didn't
say it was the factor.
Grow up. People.
Well, of course, but
people.
it's easy for us to say that, and you're right. You're not wrong at all. But it's another thing to be the kind of person with the demons that he's got to just snap your fingers and say, okay, this is my life now. He didn't have children. He didn't have a wife, although he was sort of engaged to that woman Dana, right?
I think they had broken it off before he left the Stern Show.
I think having a family would have made a difference for him. But when it's just you, as you and I both know, what you're giving me some massive obscene gestures. But
I don't. I think, thank God, he didn't have a family. He certainly wasn't equipped to be a.
Obviously not. But I think that if you look at the other people on the show,
like us,
they have a lot.
Like us, he wasn't equipped to be.
Yeah, but so we can afford to be a little irresponsible here and there, and he took it to a whole new level. But if you look at the other people who did the same thing, I think that's kind of why Jackie didn't fall into that trap, because he was married. He was, he had a life.
He was an alcoholic. Jackie came out and said he was an alcoholic.
But he didn't let it destroy his life.
All right, well, he was a functional alcoholic. Thank you, Dr. Drew. Dr. Groo.
Dr. Drew Groo.
Well, following long bouts of depression mixed with recovery, I'm barreling.
Why do you keep talking about me? It's
July 2011. Artie had recovered long enough to resume his career. His first endeavor took place July 6th as a co-host. He did a one-off radio show on Fox Sports Radio with comedian Nick DiPaolo as a stand-in for host Tony Bruno. They did so well that they were offered a deal to host a late-night sports comedy program, on DirecTV. The Nick and Artie Show premiered October 3rd, 2011, launched on approximately 30 stations nationwide and on Sirius XM. DiPaolo left the show in January of 2013, and the show was later renamed The Artie Lang Show. Artie Lang hired retired American NFL football player John Ritchie to serve as his co-host. April 28, 2014, it was announced that the show would no longer air. Artie's first real big gig after the suicide attempt is back on radio, and it is without Howard. Did you hear the Nick and Artie Show or just the Artie Show? And if so, what were your thoughts, Groo?
I am embarrassed to say I never heard it, not once.
Okay,
I guess because did you?
I did.
Was it out of curiosity, or did you really want to listen constantly?
I'm a fan of Artie's. I'm a fan of Nick DiPaolo's. It was on Sirius XM. It was on one of the talk channels. It was on. It was like an 8 o'clock, maybe 8 to midnight time slot, and I was not a everyday listener. I would listen. Sometimes they would have Howard Stern related guests. Artie, we know, is a big sports fan, so I did enjoy Artie's take on, and so is DiPaolo, so I enjoyed their take on it. I thought he's had numerous sort of different incarnations of talk shows and podcasts and radio shows, and I think his first was his best. I thought him and Nick had a good rapport, and then I think they, too, had some kind of falling out, actually. I don't know anything else. I don't have notes on it. I'm pretty sure there was some type of bad blood there, and then Artie did the show with John Ritchie, so I enjoyed it, but no, I was not a loyal fan. We know that Artie then wrote in 2013 Crash and Burn. It was now number 8 on the New York Times bestseller list. So we see a little bit, the books, not being with the Stern Show, maybe a little bit of diminishment in terms of sales. And, Groo, it's been a decade since the portly comedian has been off the Howard Stern Show. Many of the fans are pining for at least a one-off to see what might go down between Howard and Artie. Where are we these days between Artie and Howard? Howard doesn't say much, but Artie Lang over the years sure has said many things about Howard and the show. Over the years, Artie's been all over the map with comments about Howard and the show, ranging from love and admiration to disgust and pure hate. Has time softened both sides a bit? Well, I'll credit Distractify.com. The article, What Happened Between Artie Lang and Howard Stern. It's been years since Howard Stern and Artie Lang have been pals or even talked. Article goes on to talk about Artie's role in Crashing. It talks about Artie being forced off the show in 2009 and being arrested as recently as January 2019 for drug possession. We know that Artie's even posted some really shocking photos of himself on Twitter, kind of highlighting his hideously deformed nose over 3 decades of drug abuse. It seems like Artie has finally gotten over his addiction. Artie Lang has spoken about his relationship with Howard Stern on an episode of Aftershock XL, which is a YouTube show. He says now he wants to forgive Howard for booting him off the show all these years later, but he also wants to apologize for him. I feel terrible, Lang said. I'm going to call him one of these days. Artie has not been in touch with Howard Stern yet, but from what he's read in an interview, Howard has expressed some level of guilt over firing him. There should be no guilt on Howard's part, Artie clarified. Howard did nothing wrong. All Howard did was to try and help me. I love him so much. It's a shame that anyone in my life would feel guilt. I fucked up. On Howard's last book tour, he did speak to the New York Times back in May and shared some of the thoughts about his clean break with Artie. Howard goes on to say, I choose my words about Artie very carefully because I love him. We've lost touch, and that's my doing. I got my fingers crossed for the guy, and it wasn't a clean break. It was many years of wanting Artie to get help. I don't want to do anything that would rock the boat. Artie has now been released from rehab. It seems like Artie's in a better place. There may be some room for Howard to sit down and Artie to sit down and talk about what happened between them. Here's what I'm saying, Groo. After all that, I'm not holding my breath for any reunion of sorts anytime soon. But, Groo, I'll throw it to you. Might we see Artie Lang ever back on the Stern Show in some form or fashion?
Yes. When or how or what it will be, if he survives, there will be. It'll probably be when Howard decides to leave. I'm not going to say retire because I don't think he'll ever officially retire, but it'll be when he leaves Sirius and does whatever venture he does next. Because I'm sure we'll get to it, but I don't think he's going to re-sign. But that's for another time. But yeah, I think they will, because both of them seem to feel the same exact way. The way you just described it, they both seem to feel some modicum of regret, right?
Yeah, I know that Howard, what he expresses in his last round of interviews for the book, he did talk about some of the old gang who have been really notoriously very bitter, and I think we'll save that for the next podcast, but let's focus on Artie. I think if there's an opportunity out of anybody, it would be for Artie, because they didn't leave with bad blood. It was really extreme circumstances that caused the break.
Right.
But similarly, in a weird sense, like Billy Joel, I think Howard is very protective now, which we'll talk about next week. And him saying it and him doing it are two different things. I'm going to stick by my notes. I'm not holding my breath, but if there is one guy from the past, I think it will be Artie Lang. Maybe I think it's a one-off. Artie has come out and said he's not really interested in doing Howard's show as it's currently constructed. Again, comments for another time, but if there is an opportunity, it's going to be with Artie, but I'm not holding my breath.
You know, it's funny because I would rather. It's interesting the way the show has evolved and Howard has evolved. Because if you gave me a choice, have an interview with Artie Lang on the Howard Stern Show, or Howard and Artie off the air becoming friends again, I would pick the latter. I would pick Artie and Howard becoming friends again with no radio, because I hear what both of them are saying, and to me it's obvious that these two guys have a lot of affection for each other. It's obvious, by what they say. Look, what Artie said, I put more stock in what Howard says than what Artie says. Why? Because
now, you realize Artie has said some really vicious stuff about Howard in the show over the
absolutely.
He has softened, and time heals all wounds.
Yes, but I think
really,
Howard
really gone for the jugular.
Yes, but I think Howard understands what I believe, and Howard takes all his cues from me, as you know. But I believe that he understands that Artie is an addict, and addicts do fucked up things and say fucked up things, and they have no filter. And Howard is much more educated. He's much more reserved. He's much more professional, and that was just not the guy that Artie was. So Artie is going to just say whatever's going on in his head, and Howard kind of used to be that way. He has said terrible things about a lot of people who have ended up becoming regular guests on the show. So, this is obviously a different situation, but like I said, I put more stock in what Howard says because Artie was and is technically under the influence, and I think that makes a big difference.
Okay.
Okay. But I do think we will see them together again.
Okay. Well, let me ask you
are
this.
snarling. That was a snarl.
Well, would you say out of anyone from the Howard Stern expanded universe, if you asked any Stern fan, give me one guy or gal from the past to come on the show today for an interview, for a segment, I think it's still Artie is the number one guy. I'd want to hear Artie more than anybody else from the past. You agree? Disagree?
Dead or alive?
Come on, obviously alive.
It's a toss-up.
With who? Jackie?
No.
Come on.
No. The toss-up
Billy
is
West?
with my toss-up is Richard Simmons. Especially now.
Somebody from the show. Now you're on.
Yeah.
From the show, Richard was a well-known guest.
Okay, all right, fine.
He's not part of the core team.
From the show. Artie Lang. There's not even a second place.
Thank you. That's my point. Okay. Let's see. What role did Howard Stern have on growth of satellite radio? Did Howard Stern really affect subscriber growth? Well, let's go back to March 31st, 2016. Howard Stern himself proudly announced, "Today I've been asked by Jim Meyer, CEO of Sirius XM, to be the first to announce this huge milestone." Howard teased before having whackpacker Fred the Elephant Boy mumble his way through the news Monday morning. Howard announced that Sirius XM has hit 30 million subscribers. That is huge.
Huge.
No one understood what Elephant Boy uttered. So we started off with 465 net subscribers, and now we're at a record high of 30.1 million subscribers as of March of 2016. So we know that while on terrestrial radio, the Howard Stern Show became the number one morning show in most markets across the country. So in 2004, all eyes were on the king of all media when he announced his decision to move to satellite radio with Sirius, which at the time only boasted about 400,000 subscribers. As the world witnessed through, subscriptions has skyrocketed with Howard at the mic. Here's the bottom line. Do you give Howard credit as a big piece for the growth of Sirius satellite radio?
I give him most, if not all, the credit. He's the only one who really brought it to mainstream media with appearances on the talk shows. Like, who else? You know, it was him. What, Oprah Winfrey? No. It was Howard Stern. Without exception.
30.1 million subscribers. Think that, forget what Howard, Sirius XM, could you see a day where they hit 50 million subscribers?
It's a good question. If it didn't hit 50 million by now, I don't know, because what's the next innovation? Like, it's been a while, and like I said before, I expected it to be a lot bigger than it actually is. Like, there are people that I know who have it comes in cars now. It comes with it for like a free 3-month trial. Right. They use it for 3 months, and then they don't use it anymore, or they let it go, and that seems to be more common than I ever thought it would be. It's not where I thought it would be before, so I don't know. I think that I have trouble with that.
And this is a much larger discussion, but I think also the further development of podcasts, music service.
I'm glad you said
services. That. I think that SiriusXM has developed that model of very much on-demand listening for your shows, not necessarily your music channels, but you can go on the app and listen to. Not only can you listen to a certain Howard Stern show, but you could even pinpoint the exact segment that you want to hear. Oh, I want to listen to JD talking about blah 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 blah. You could skip. So SiriusXM has gotten to a very precise, at least for its talent, on demand, and also even I don't watch it as much, the video app, but there is now they've expanded to other shows as well. Busted Open now has video pieces now where you can go on and watch the hosts talk. So anyway,
well, I listen to.
I don't know what I just said.
No, I know what you said, and I listen to satellite radio constantly, and I am going to admit right here that it's not Howard that I'm usually listening to.
All right, so here, let me ask you. So hold on.
Okay, go ahead.
Next question.
Go ahead.
Overall, what do you think of Sirius Satellite Radio? Do you use the service? Do you enjoy the service? And is it true that OutQ, the gay channel, is your favorite channel?
That last part, no, I didn't even know it existed. But now that you mention it, I'm going to have to go look.
Sorry.
No, I think what you just said, though, actually, it should be bigger than it is because it's got something for everybody. It represents everybody.
A lot of competition for entertainment these days. It's phenomenal.
That's true.
I just read today that WWE is now possibly going to sell its rights to the network to maybe a larger subscription package like Amazon. It's incredible.
I heard about that too, yeah.
It's incredible, the deals and side deals and platforms. Entertainment has become a massive business. I know we talked about this earlier, but I remember my mom saying it back in '79. Pay for TV? I'm never gonna. And then now it's people pay literally thousands of dollars for video, audio.
And that's just me.
Incredible. Well, it's not just you, but I know I poke fun, but it's incredible. It's absolutely incredible.
Yeah, I listen to
competition for entertainment dollars.
Yeah, and I listen to. I mean, I think I'm more political.
Do you like Sirius XM?
Love it.
Do you listen to the service?
Yes, all the time.
Okay.
All the time.
Okay. I'm sure Howard Stern would say good that you listen to other stuff beyond his show.
Yeah, and he does, or at least he used to promote other stations.
He does.
Yeah, so absolutely. I listen to everything from E Street Radio to the Billy Joel channel when it's on to Classic Rewind. I listen to a lot of CNN and Fox News lately just because I think I'm more politically interested than you are. But
I am interested. I don't talk about it because there's two things you don't talk about.
I'm not talking about it. I'm just saying what I listen to. You know?
Hey, Moody, what do you listen to? A good question, Groo. I listen to...
well, you didn't give me a chance.
I didn't want to give you... All right, go ahead. I apologize. I'm sorry.
Moody, I have an interesting question for you. What,
ahead.
if anything, besides Howard 100 and Howard 101 on the Sirius XM channel do you listen to?
I'm sure my listening habits are probably fairly similar to yours. I always turn on, no matter what, I turn on Howard first. Now, in the morning, I'm kind of quieter. I'm not much into the music in the morning. I'm easing into the day, so I'm looking for Howard. If there's nothing good there, I'll go. I like more of the business news channels. I like Fox Business, maybe CNBC. I'll listen to see if Busted Open is talking about anything interesting, and then I'll go to the sports. I don't like the morning guys from Mad Dog Sports, but I'll listen to Fox Sports, ESPN, some of the morning sports. And then, yes, in terms of music, I'm right there with you. E Street, Billy Joel channel when it's on. I love the classic rock channels. I even listen to occasionally some of the old school hip hop stuff. So my listening is probably fairly similar to yours. I usually start with Howard, and then I work my way based on, my mood or whatever's on the Stern Show. If it's interesting, not interesting, I'll make my move there.
Yeah, but there is a wealth of stuff, and it's interesting how the internet part of it has more than like the car stuff. Actually, that's one of the things I don't like yet, but I'm hoping they're going to change that. I'm hoping they add an on-demand feature to the vehicle platform.
They have a very weird configuration of channels, and I've always said, we could probably do a whole podcast on this alone. I've always said with entertainment platforms, give me less, make it more focused, make it better, and I probably would be even happier with the service. I don't need 1,000. They have like the sports channels. Like you can get like the Michael Kay show, but it's not on the major sports platforms. It's on like one of the 1,000. It's hard to find, and I don't have the patience.
And that's like, but
I don't have the patience.
That they need to fix that. They need to make it more user friendly, and I wonder why. I guess it's because you have to kind of get 2 subscriptions to have in the car. And I know that I have a package with both that is a little more money per month than if I just had it in the car, even though I only listen in the car. But sometimes I will listen through the phone app. For example, if I want to hear a Busted Open episode that I missed, because you can't. There's no on-demand feature for the vehicle, so you got to go to the phone for that.
For example, when I got home on Friday, I saw that Mad Dog had on Mark Berman, a New York Post sports writer. So as I'm unpacking my bag, I actually went to Mad Dog on demand, and I actually clicked on the Mark Berman interview. The Knicks fired their GM, and I wanted to hear his thoughts. So, it's great stuff, and the on-demand stuff it's instant. And it's probably the way our culture is going in terms of entertainment. It's right in our hands right now, and that's it for me. For Howard Stern, the Sirius Years Part 1. Any last thoughts on Howard through about 2010? Artie's done. We'll talk about where we're going to go with Sirius Years Part 2. But anything you want to add to bookend this indelible podcast?
Yeah, not really to add. Just to I think Artie leaving was a major turning point for the show, and I wonder sometimes if the show would have, and we'll get into this next time, if the show would have progressed the way it has and become the show it has if what happened with Artie didn't happen.
Okay, now don't go into extensive details.
I'm not.
But answer that question, yes or no, because I already have my answer.
What was the question?
Let's say we're in Earth, blah, 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 and Artie Lang is not a drug addict, and Artie Lang doesn't have his issues. We'll talk about it in detail, but just yes or no, do you think Howard Stern, the show, would have evolved into something similar that it is today?
Yes.
Yes or no? I have the same answer.
Yeah.
Okay, so
I think because Howard evolved.
Okay, but
right?
Thank you. But
okay, all right, okay, I gotcha.
But we know that media minds think alike. So clearly, I agree. So that's it for Howard Stern, the Sirius Years Part 1. Next Saturday, Stay tuned for Howard Stern, the Sirius Years Part 2. Groo, Artie Lang is gone, and the Stern Show reverts back to the core four of Howard, Robin, Fred, and Gary Baba Booey Delabate. Slowly but surely, changes take place on the Stern Show. Howard In Demand Show and the crew are gone. The Howard 100 News team, they're gone. Certain guests are no longer welcome back on the show. Scott the Engineer disappears. Wendy the Retard is now Wendy the Slow Adult. Gary the Retard is now Gary the Conqueror. Eric the Actor dies.
No, Eric the Midget became Eric the Actor, right?
Thank you.
Well, wait, you got to go.
You'll have the floor. You'll have the floor.
If you're going to do it with Wendy and Gary, you got to do it with Eric.
Much momentum. The fucking thing sucks. All right, you do it live.
We'll do it.
Robin gets cancer. Marcy Turk joins the team.
Boo.
Howard moves to a light 3 days a week schedule and focuses more on A-list guest interviews. It's the king of all media, the Sirius Years Part 2. Any other things you might think we'll discuss next week?
Yeah, we're going to have very different opinions.
Why would you say that? You don't know my opinion. I mean...
Well, because whenever we get into something that causes controversy, even if we have the same opinions, we always seem to argue about it because we're passionate about it.
Okay, fine.
I think that's why. And I believe we're both very passionate about the path that the show has taken.
Yes.
So I'm really actually very excited to get into that stuff, even more so than this one. Even though I think I've really enjoyed talking about it. You need this one to set up the next one. So
and then in 2 weeks, our Kansas Dust in the Wind podcast. We're fresh out of ideas. Good night, everybody.
Today we're talking about Jeff Porcaro and the music of Toto.
Might not be a bad one.
Yeah. I'm really looking forward to it's not going to be a bash fest, but we're going to have some strong opinions on it.
Yeah.
Because think of it, and I'll just end with this, or I'll end my thoughts with this. 10 or 15 or even 20 years ago, could you imagine a situation where you would be driving to work and you would not want to listen to Howard Stern?
Not in a kabillion years.
Yeah.
Not in a kabillion years.
And yet, here we are, and Howard is not, even with, because even when Howard was 5 days a week and all that stuff, we still were able to listen to, we still had our music in the car, we still had all that other stuff, so we still had options. But there was a time when the only real option for us was Howard Stern, and if you told us back then that 20 years later, we'd be like, we'll skip Howard right now, it's a show from last week or whatever, we'll listen to Billy Joe, like, we would have been like, no way.
All you need to know was in college, I would how many 18-year-olds wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning to do anything? And I would get up religiously at 6 a.m. I'd trudge over to my radio, turn it on, and then go back and lay down. And I would stay up and literally listen to I'm almost embarrassed now. What a lazy, slovenly. I'm sitting in bed for 5 hours. But I did.
It's all we've got.
It's all we got, man. Well, this was a good one. I enjoyed discussing Howard Stern, the Sirius Years.
Likewise.
You want to wrap us up and take us home?
Yes. Evan, it's always a pleasure. The pleasure is mine and yours. To all of those out there, we're looking forward to conversing with you about this and other controversial topics.
Just like Sirius XM, we're going to hopefully we'll break 350 downloads this week. Damn
yes.
That huge contract Podcast One gave us, it's paying dividends right off the
Yes, our goal is Patreon.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
ooh.
Are we doing anything with like Instagram or I don't know?
Not yet. We need a slow burn. But actually, one thing that we'll talk about next week that I wanted to get to was the competition. We are actually, what we're doing is competition for Howard Stern in a sense. the invention of the podcast has made a dent. Of course, Apple comes in and fucks everything up.
I think Howard was late to the game with that, or maybe had an old school attitude. But I think his last round of book tours, he did several podcasts.
Yeah.
So obviously, his attitude is probably changed.
And I think when he leaves Sirius, I think podcasting is where he's headed. But we'll save that for another time.
All right. Wrap us up.
All right. We will see you next week. And until then, 1, 2, 3, rip 'em.
Whack, whack.